Top Justice Department officials facing major questions as November approaches, whether to temporarily scale back work in criminal investigations involving former President Trump. According to new reporting in the New York Times, the DOJ is worried about the so-called 60-day rule. It's an unwritten rule in which the department tries to avoid taking action in the lead up to elections to avoid the possibility of influencing democracy. Trump, of course, is not on the ballot this year, but he is still the most significant member of the Republican Party, endorsed most of their Senate candidates, and it's unclear whether the 60-day rule applies to a high-profile political figure who is not technically a candidate in the coming election. This Thursday marks 60 days from the midterms. The Times reports that a Justice Department spokesperson declined to comment on the matter. So, Joyce, I want to get you to weigh in here. President Trump, former President Trump, not on the ballot, but in many ways is all over the ballot, and he shadows this entire race. What's your assessment? What would be the appropriate course of action here from the DOJ?
So as you point out, Jonathan, this is an unwritten rule, but the 60-day rule is something every prosecutor is aware of. I spent 25 years at DOJ, and during many election years, not a surprise, we had open investigations on people who were going to be on the ballot, either in the primary or the general. And the way the rule was typically understood in U.S. attorneys' offices across the country, as well as at Main Justice in Washington, was that it meant you didn't take any overt steps in an investigation that would become public during that 60-day grace period for a candidate who was on the ballot. It's, of course, an unwritten rule. And so in thinking about how to apply it here, rather than in adhering to those strict contours of what was always understood about candidates on the ballot, DOJ will have to consider the purpose of the rule, which is to avoid interfering in elections, to avoid influencing elections in any way. I think that there's an awfully good argument to be made that Trump simply doesn't fall within the ambit of this rule because he's not on the ballot in this campaign. But folks at DOJ appreciate that the country in many ways is a powder keg. They'll want to think through this carefully, and one way they might ultimately decide to split the baby here is to be very careful about taking overt steps that would become public in their investigation, like searching another location. At the same time, that doesn't keep them from beginning or continuing to work internally. And that might even include, we don't know yet whether they'll get here, but it could include beginning the process of drafting indictments or working with witnesses who might provide helpful information, even including speaking with some of the folks around Trump who could possibly have liability for what went on at Mar-a-Lago, and finding ways to move the case forward without doing it in a public fashion.
And, of course, any discussion of this unwritten rule causes screams from Hillary Clinton's campaign and supporters because, of course, James Comey's decision to reopen her investigation into her emails just 10 days or so before the 2016 election.